It was a lonely gas station on the edge of a quiet highway, the kind of place where buzzing fluorescent lights hummed against cracked windows and the faint smell of gasoline mixed with stale coffee. The night was still, broken only by the occasional car rushing past without stopping. Inside, behind the counter, worked Emily. She was the kind of person most people overlooked. Soft voice, polite smile, her brown hair tied back in a plain ponytail. Her uniform was wrinkled, from long shifts, but always clean. Her eyes seemed tired, yet she never complained. She scanned items, offered receipts, and went back to wiping the counter again and again. Nobody thought twice about her. She looked ordinary, almost invisible. But invisible wasn't the truth she carried. That night, 3 men came in. Their truck screeched outside, and heavy boots stomped across the floor. They wore leather jackets and carried the smell of beer and smoke. Their voices were loud, too loud for the small space. They grabbed snacks off the shelves, threw bottles onto the counter, and laughed like they owned the night. One of them banged the register bell with his fist, grinning at Emily. "Hey, sweetheart, ring us up fast. And maybe smile while you're at it." The other 2 whistled and made crude jokes as they leaned closer. Emily said nothing. She quietly scanned the items, her movements steady, her face calm. The men didn't like being ignored. One of them slammed a soda can onto the counter so hard it burst, spilling foam across her uniform. The store went silent. Even the humming lights seemed to pause. Emily slowly wiped the spill, her hands not shaking, her eyes not rising from the counter. Her silence only fueled their arrogance. The tallest one leaned over the counter, close enough that his breath fogged the glass barrier. "Why so quiet, huh? What's your story?" Emily finally looked up, her eyes calm, her voice low. "You don't want to know my story." The man laughed. His pride stung. He reached across the counter and grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin. The sound of her bones creaked under his grip. A gasp came from the only other customer in the store, a grey-haired man sitting quietly at the back with a cup of coffee. But Emily didn't flinch. She didn't move. She stared straight into the man's eyes. And then, in one swift motion, she twisted her wrist free, gripped his arm, and slammed it against the counter so fast he couldn't react. The man cried out, his face twisting in shock, his bravado crumbling. The store froze. The other 2 men backed up, eyes wide, unsure of what just happened. Emily let him go and stepped back, her breathing steady, her hands calm. It wasn't rage that moved her, it was precision. One of the men cursed and lunged forward, ready to hit her, but before his fist could rise, the grey-haired man from the corner finally stood. He set his coffee down slowly, his voice carrying weight. "Don't touch her, son. You have no idea who you're dealing with." The men turned toward him, confused. The stranger lifted his sleeve, showing faded burn scars across his forearm. His eyes locked onto Emily's with recognition. He spoke again, soft but sure. "I know that look. I've seen it in the firehouse. She's one of us." The room fell silent. The men froze. Everyone stared at Emily, not as a cashier anymore, but as something far greater. She said nothing, but her eyes gave away truths she tried to bury. She wasn't just a store clerk. She had once been a firefighter. The kind who ran into burning buildings when everyone else ran out. The kind who carried people on her shoulders through smoke and flames while the ceiling threatened to collapse. She carried scars that her uniform now covered, both on her skin and in her heart. Memories of fire, of screams, of people she saved and people she couldn't. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. The men stumbled back, their confidence gone, fear flashing across their faces. They muttered curses under their breath and hurried out the door, their boots pounding against the pavement until the truck roared away. The store stayed still for a long moment before life slowly returned. The old man nodded once toward Emily before picking up his coffee again. There was respect in his eyes, deep and knowing. The secret she had carried quietly in her chest was no longer hidden. The next weeks changed everything. Customers who once ignored her now looked at her differently. Some left bigger tips at the counter, some whispered quiet thank yous, without asking for details. A few tried to ask about her past, but she rarely answered. Her eyes held memories too heavy for small talk. She still worked the same shifts, still smiled politely, still stocked shelves and brewed bitter coffee. But those who had seen that night could never see her the same again. Behind her quiet steps was the weight of battles fought not with guns, but with fire and smoke. Her mind replayed the nights when she had pulled strangers from collapsing houses, her lungs burning, her body bruised. Her soul still carried the voices of those she couldn't save. Yet even with her pain, she chose to keep moving, to stand tall, to offer kindness to anyone who walked through the door. That was her real strength, not just what she did in fire, but what she continued to do afterward. She was proof that some of the strongest people are the ones you overlook, the ones who say little but carry the heaviest stories. The three men never came back. Maybe they were ashamed, maybe afraid, but their short visit left behind a legend. People in town spoke of it often, telling the story of the quiet gas station clerk who turned out to be far more than anyone imagined. They spoke of the way she carried herself after, with calm eyes and steady hands, like someone who had already faced the worst night could ever bring. Years later, when the gas station closed down and the shelves went empty, Emily's story still lived on. People remembered her not just as a cashier, but as a firefighter who had once walked through flames for strangers and kept on living. With dignity, her silence carried power. Her calmness carried strength, and her scars carried lessons the world would never forget. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe so more people hear it. Drop a comment below. Tell us what part of Emily's journey moved you the most, because your words might inspire someone else. And remember, the strongest people are not always the loudest. They are often the quiet souls who survived battles we'll never see and still choose to live with kindness, courage, and grace.